Welcome, welcome. It is Wednesday, October the 8th. This is Hurricane Hub Live. I'm Chief Meteorologist Tim Pandage. Thank you, as always, for joining us here on 13 News Now Plus and on our YouTube stream. We appreciate you joining us this evening. We've got a good amount to get to tonight on HHL. We're watching Jerry, our only named storm out in the Atlantic Basin right now. And for the last 24 hours or so, it's been struggling to intensify. Although I was just reading with the 8 o'clock advisory, hurricane hunters now surveilling the storm, finding it a little bit stronger. It's been combating some wind shear out there, but it is still expected to become a hurricane, although intensity estimates have come down a little bit in the long range here as it passes out into the open Atlantic, possibly threatening Bermuda. Right now, expected to max out as a Category 1 hurricane, becoming our 5th hurricane of the season. Now in the East Pac, things are still cranking out there. Possibility still in play for 3 named storms at the same time. We got Octave out there, Priscilla, and the possibility of Raymond forming anytime. With an area of interest there that's up to a high chance of developing. And then back at home here along the East Coast, we're going to talk a little bit about a non-tropical low, or nor'easter, set to impact the U.S. East Coast this coming weekend. Now, there's probably a small chance that it develops a warm core and could be possibly tropical or subtropical, but most likely not. Still going to be a potent tropical storm, or excuse me, potent coastal storm that's going to bring some significant impacts along the eastern seaboard. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Out in the tropics right now, here is Jerry on infrared satellite imagery. It doesn't look that great, right? And then we go back 24 hours, and you can see in the last couple of frames, which indicates why the hurricane hunter said they're starting to see it intensify a little bit. You see a flare-up of some convection closer to the core there. Right now, 65-mile-per-hour wind. So compare with yesterday when it was at 50, it's a little bit stronger in terms of its winds, and its pressures come down slightly. Now at 999 millibars. Yesterday it was at 1,003, so not a huge drop in central pressure. Usually the pressure will drop first, and then the wind speeds will start to come up. It is now tracking west-northwest. Remember, yesterday it was moving due west at 23, still moving pretty quickly at 21 miles per hour. But we switched things up here on visible satellite imagery, and you can see the shear here. The low-level circulation was exposed with some strong west and northwest shear getting imparted on the system there. Eventually, it will overcome that a bit as it builds to the north and west. Shear will come down a little bit, and it'll be a little more vertically stacked and start to intensify and come in line with the intensity estimates, which now take it up to a Category 1. Again, down from, I think it was 105 mile per hour max intensity yesterday's output. Now we're maxing out at, looks to be 80 mile per hour winds as a Category 1. So low-end Category 1 storm. Here is Bermuda, so the forecast track right now does take it even looping to the east of Bermuda, which is good. So it should be missing all land. Closest approach here will be the northern Leeward Islands, but on this pass, it'll be on the clean side. So remember, the worst of the storms is going to be on the right side, front right side of the storm, depending on its movement. So that will be off to the north and east of the islands there. In terms of its wind field, here's a look at the potential extent of tropical storm force winds. In the yellow here, 39 miles per hour or greater, taking us right on through the end of the week and into the weekend. Looks like the winds do steer clear of the islands, but there actually are some watches out for those areas, tropical storm watches. I'll show you those in a second. Forecast models here pretty much right in line with the forecast code put out by the National Hurricane Center. Certainly there are a few outliers, a couple outliers to the east, and 2 outliers that are a little bit farther to the west. Both still steer clear of land impacts, which is some good news. Here's a look at those tropical alerts. Northern Leeward Islands, tropical storm watches are up there for the possibility of tropical storm conditions as we go through the next 48 hours or so. Elsewhere in the basin, still watching this one wave here that's now pretty much moving over land. Still have a 10% chance on it developing, although likely it won't happen. 0% chance of it really happening as it moves over the higher terrain of central Mexico and just completely gets sheared apart. Let's look at the model comparison here, because both long-range models don't show much at all with Jerry. I mean, here we are Friday. It's not showing anything. And then here we start to see some semblance of it on the Euro. There's Bermuda there, so tracking it well off to the east of Bermuda. But then here is our coastal low, our nor'easter taking shape. Good model agreement on that one, at least, skirting along the southeast and the mid-Atlantic coastline and even up into New England this weekend and into early next week. So let's talk a little bit more about that. An area of low pressure taking shape and then drifting off to the north and east. Typically, when we get a nor'easter, they start to accelerate as they push off to the north and east, and they're not a really long duration event. A little bit different this go around. We've got high pressure situated over Nova Scotia and northern New England, and that's essentially blocking its exit paths to the north and east. So modeling here has been indicating, more so the European been consistently indicating, that a storm develops, gets to about the latitude of the Chesapeake Bay, and then sits and meanders offshore for what could be several days. That would keep up the winds, the onshore winds, the periods of heavy rain, and lead to a prolonged coastal flooding, tidal flooding event for areas that have been battered by storms passing well offshore so far this season, seeing another go around. And if it does situate in this direction here, we won't have the onshore coming in the Outer Banks. It becoming offshore, so sound side flooding likely going to be a problem here as the winds wrap around and come in more out of the north and west later in the weekend and early next week. And of course, areas facing north side facing shorelines along the Chesapeake Bay and east side facing beaches there are going to see some significant tidal flooding if it does play out as currently modeled. And then eventually by Tuesday, it'll begin drifting into the east, and the storm system overall will start to weaken. But it may be a very unsettled several days starting this weekend in the mid-Atlantic and southeast. Here's a look at certain amounts of rainfall totals there. You saw them up to around 4 to 6 inches right along the eastern shore and southeastern Virginia. A steep gradient for drier weather farther to the west and inland, as this will be a very impactful storm for the East Coast. Coastal areas back inland, not as bad at all. Here's a look at wind potential, wind gust potential as of the European model. Up and down the mid-Atlantic, down through the southeast. Okay, as we go through Saturday, watch these wind gusts really start to ramp up as we get into the day on Sunday. I mean, Virginia Beach, eastern shore could be seeing wind gusts up and over 50 miles per hour. This continues into Sunday afternoon, Sunday night, into Monday morning. Still looking at 40, 50 mile per hour wind gusts. Again, shifting direction now, coming out of the north and west. So blowing the water now out of the rivers and out of the bay at this point in time, with the low pressure center centered well off to the east and even northeast of the Chesapeake Bay, mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. By Monday evening, still looking at very blustery conditions there. All right, elsewhere in the tropical Atlantic, we've got the 2 and 3 week outlook from the Climate Prediction Center. Again, highlighting as we go out into the middle of the month and even end of October, highlighting the potential development of something coming out of the Central American gyre, which is a big spinning area of low pressure that sometimes spindles of energy break off from the overall structure of this low pressure system, and they eject out into favorable environments in the Western Caribbean, the Southern Gulf, or the Eastern Pacific. And you can see the signal here, moderate to even high chances in the Eastern Pacific of something developing there over the next week and a half. And then it really highlights this still going out over to the end of the month of moderate chances in that same exact area from a gyre event taking shape. Eastern Pacific, 2 storms, both tropical storms now, Priscilla and Octave, pretty close in proximity to one another. Octave is on its way out, though, so we're not talking about any Fujiwara type of effect here like we saw with Imelda and Umberto. And this is a huge tropical wave here, which also has the remnants of that other wave that was in the Bay of Campeche, building over Mexico, so likely adding some moisture to that. Next name on the list there would be Raymond. Looks like we're only getting one more advisory here out of Octave. That's down to 45 mile per hour winds, and we've got Priscilla down to a tropical storm after maxing out as a hurricane, drifting north, may throw some of the residual moisture up into the desert southwest portions of the U.S. All right, we're up to 10 tropical storms now in the Atlantic, 4 hurricanes, 3 majors. We may be up to 5 hurricanes with Jerry. And then East Pac's up to 16, 9 of those hurricanes and 3 majors. All right, coming up after a quick break, since we're talking nor'easters, I've got a nor'easter explainer, but that really kind of portends to it's winter effects, but we'll still go through it. And also, we've got tropical trivia coming up after a quick break as well. We'll see you in a few. Welcome back to Hurricane Hub Live. A nor'easter is forecast to target the East Coast this weekend, bringing windy and rainy conditions that could lead to some coastal flooding and tidal flooding. Here's a pre-recorded video of me explaining the different types of nor'easters that we typically see in the colder months. Winter storms along the East Coast can be powerful and disruptive, often bringing heavy snow, strong winds, and hazardous conditions. Among these systems, two primary storm types, Miller A and Miller B, are responsible for some of the most significant winter weather events in the region. Miller A storms typically develop in the Gulf of Mexico or along the southeastern U.S. coastline, forming along an old frontal boundary. As these systems move northeastwards, they rapidly intensify, drawing in moisture from the Atlantic Ocean. The mid-Atlantic and New England states are often hit the hardest, experiencing heavy snowfall, blizzard conditions, and strong coastal winds. Although the main impact of a Miller A storm is in the northeast, its effects can be felt much farther south. Icy conditions can extend into Georgia and the Carolinas, while severe weather, including thunderstorms and tornadoes, may develop across Florida and other parts of the southeast. A prime example of a Miller A storm is the superstorm of 1993, also known as the storm of the century. This massive storm system brought record-breaking snowfall, hurricane-force winds, and widespread disruptions across the eastern U.S., affecting millions and causing billions in damage. Now, Miller B storms originate as an area of low pressure over the Midwest before tracking eastward. As the system encounters the Appalachian Mountains, the original low pressure center typically weakens. However, a secondary low pressure system forms on the eastern side of the mountains, closer to the coast. Once this new coastal low develops, it strengthens significantly, fueled by the warmer waters of the Gulf Stream. As it moves northward, it can bring heavy snowfall to the Mid-Atlantic and New England regions, often creating widespread travel disruptions. A well-known example of a Miller B storm is the 2010 North American blizzard, which buried parts of the Northeast under feet of snow and brought major cities like Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia to a standstill. Well, just to clarify, we are not expecting any snow at all with this coastal low nor'easter. That's just to kind of give you an overlay of the different types of nor'easters, especially as we get into the colder months straight ahead. All right, tropical trivia, yesterday's question. It's unusual to see an A-named storm get retired because they happen so early in the season. Conditions aren't usually all that conducive for stronger storms. But when was the last occurrence of one of these getting retired? 77, 72, 92, or 2001? It was back in 01. And that name was Allison, in 2001. And there have been 7 overall A-named storms retired since 1954 in the Atlantic. Now, on the same theme of retired storm names, let's go over to the East and Central Pacific. The first storm to be retired in the Eastern and Central Pacific combined basins was also a retired name in the Atlantic. Name that storm. Was it John, Hazel, Patricia, or Otis? I'll have the answer for you tomorrow night on Hurricane Hub Live. Remember, we are here 7 days a week at 8 p.m. for the latest on the tropics. We'll see you back here tomorrow night.